Okay, Rob, you on the call now?
I am.
Okay, Coach, we got both of you on here.
How you doing, Rob? Hi, Coach. It's really a pleasure to be on the phone with you. Well, thank you, sir. I hope I can help you somewhat. Well, you've helped everybody else, so you're too kind.
Hey, Coach, so I just want to kind of preface it by this. Our whole mission on this is just to basically spread the good to the world, right? And so our focus and mission is to talk to people like you, and we picked 5 people that represent passion, purpose, and principle. And obviously you exemplify that more than anybody I know. So what we're doing is trying to get these stories and just talks from you about your life and kind of how you impact the world and those types of things.
You
then,
just go ahead and ask anything you want, and I'll reply.
Okay, I'm going to pass you over to Rob. He's going to ask you 2 questions, and I'll jump in whenever.
Okay.
Thanks, Coach. Okay, Rob.
You know, Greg and I met almost 10 years ago, and we rendezvoused in Vegas after having talked, for hours about this kind of stuff, about human behavior and how we think life can be lived and the way people can help each other. And he was there at that time to meet with you. I was like, oh, I'll be darned.
I almost forgot about that.
Yeah, that's when we first... What year was that, Rob? Greg can tell you more.
I think, Coach, you were doing a speech down there. I met you in the room with your buddy, but I think it was like 2012, maybe 2011, 2012. You bought me some ice cream.
Uh-oh. For no real particular reason at that time, other than I was always a basketball fan and I played. I wasn't at the level Greg got to, and certainly in your experience, but I played for decades, and I watched a lot of it, and of all the college coaches, for whatever reason, I can't even say why, but I just always thought you were a great coach, and it felt like anybody who played for you was lucky to play for you. And after having watched the film about you, I just realized that you're so much more than a basketball coach. And that's not to diminish coaching, because Greg and I have also talked at length about the value of talented and empathetic and skilled coach, because there are a lot of them that aren't necessarily there either for the right reason, but they care about winning than the welfare of their kids or whatever it might be. You do exemplify, I think, the finest qualities a coach can. And that's why when Greg and I talked about how we kind of promote proper behavior between human beings and the passion and purpose and principle about, I think there's nobody that you could possibly be on the phone with more appropriate than yourself. So, Rob, you're so very kind, and every time I'm fortunate enough to have somebody say something nice, I think of my mentor of 40 years, John Wood. Yeah. Never in my life, there's 8 billion people in the world, and I've never met a human being that represents goodness as much as him, and with no ego. Just give you just an example, that wonderful compliment you gave me. It's I can't express it, so I have to tell you the way he expressed things. We were sitting in a restaurant in Baton Rouge. I brought him down to my summer basketball camp to talk to the coaches and the team, and we were sitting having lunch one day. And I saw a young man standing off on the side, maybe 40 years old, looking over at the table. And just as we got our lunch, he came over and he said, "Excuse me, Coach Wood." He said, "I know this is rude of me." He said, "I don't want an autograph. I don't want to shake your hand. I don't want to take a picture. I just want to tell you this." He said, "You're my hero. You're a legend of all time, and you're one of God's angels." He said, "God bless you, Coach Wood." And he turned to walk away. Coach Wood put down his ribs. Young man. He waved him back. "What's your name, young man?" He told him. And we'll say it was Rob. And he said, "Rob, that was really, really kind of you." He said, "You just made an old man feel real good." But he said, "I wouldn't want you to leave here false pretenses about who I really am. I'm still a work in progress. He said, I'm not what I ought to be. I'm not what I could be. I'm not what I should be. And I'm not what I could be. However, he said, you stimulated me to make me a better man. And I thought, how in the world? Well, it kind of reminds me a little bit of my mother. The two mentors I had, my mother was abandoned by her husband, my biological father, 2 days before I was born. Never returned, never called, just vanished, just left her. This is 1935, beginning of the middle of the Depression, practically all hit at once. She came off a farm, had an 8th grade education, and demeaning is heck for her. She had to become a maid and clean people's and babysit for the children of these people. We lived in a one-room apartment above a bar and a hardware store. But that woman never, ever complained in her life. And what John Wood does, what he does, there's an old Edgar Guest is John Wood's favorite poet. And my mother is Edgar Guest. And we should all follow this. He said, I'd rather see a lesson than to hear one any day. I'd rather you walk with me than to merely show the way. The eye's a better teacher and more willing than the ear. The counsel you are giving may be very fine and true, but I'd rather get my examples by watching what you do. And as a result, I can remember two specific incidents that my mother taught me how to live. One night, she came home from babysitting, and I waited up for her for a long time. Little 10-year-old boy, and one-room apartment, no bed. I never slept in a bed for 21 years. She had a little bed that pulled out from the wall, and I could touch her head. I had a little sofa right next to her. She asked me to sit in her chair. So she pulled up the footstool, and she said, son, she said, I'm really embarrassed to tell you this. I just don't want you to make the same mistake I made. I'm thinking my mother never smoked. She never drank. She never swore. She never talked about another person. She never dated anybody. What's my mama talking about? She said, when these big shots come to pick me up, she said, I'm so self-conscious that they may ask me, where'd you go to college? I don't want to say it was the 8th grade. What's your husband do? I don't want to say he left me. Or they'll smell the mothballs under my clothes because we buy them at the rummage sale. So she said, son, I don't want you to make this mistake. What I do, she said, I look up big words in the dictionary, and I write them on a 3x5 card and try to remember them. And so when I get in the car, I try to control the conversation with them. She said, Dale, don't ever do that in your life. She said, I'm trying to make an image on those people. She said, son, don't do that, because if you spend too much time following you'll eventually tarnish your character and be an unhappy man. Second story on my mother. She used to go shopping for groceries, middle of winter. I'd see her put on her winter coat, and she'd come back with brown paper sacks, and she was always conscious they gave her the right thing. Bread, milk, cheese, potatoes, very seldom meat, and she'd always cross them off the list. 2 times, Greg and Rob, I saw her go get her winter coat. I'll be right back. Where you going, Mama? She came over. Oh, she had a quarter in her hand one time. Oh, the lady at the red oil gave me a quarter too much for change. So we need to learn from having mentors that can teach us to do things right. Pete Maravich is another story I'd like to share with you. I inherited the job. His father got fired. He was the coach here, and Pete was suspended from school after his playing career ended for some disciplinary reasons. So I wrote both Pete and Chris Maravich, his father, a letter and told them I'm very sorry I had to inherit this job under these conditions. And I understand there's friction and, I wasn't a part of it, but the door's always open. I wish you'd come back to the family, and that was it. Well, they never answered. I understood that. We were on a road trip that I played at the University of Oklahoma, in a neutral site on the road, national television. And I was waiting. It was we had a little lunch. We were going to take the guys to a movie the day before the game. I was waiting for the check, and all of a sudden I get a tap on the shoulder. I turn around. Here's Pistol Pete Maravich. I'd never met him, never seen him, never talked to him. Coach Brown, he said, got up and, what are you doing here? He said, I'm doing color for the game tomorrow. I looked at my watch and I said, I've got a meeting upstairs with the team and I'm a stickler on being on time. I said, Pistol, would you come upstairs and let's bury the hatchet? Just talk to the team for me? Absolutely. So I go upstairs and I had a very good team at that time, a couple lottery picks on the team. I said, he needs no introduction. The greatest offensive player in the history of the game, Pistol Pete Maravich. He gets up and this is his speech. He said, I see a couple of you guys in the front row, probably going to be lottery picks here. Don't ever attempt to break my record. I average 44.2 points a game at LSU. Nobody will ever break that. He said, I went into the NBA. I was the highest paid professional athlete in history. I led the NBA in scoring. He said, I had everything the world calls success. Man, I drove the flashiest cars. I always walked around with $3,000 to $4,000 in my pocket. I was a gambler. He said, I drank too much. I took drugs. I chased women. He said, everything the world calls success I had. And he said, you know what I was? I was a frustrated, disillusioned, and bewildered human being. He said, one night in my home in Louisiana, I walked around, I tried to communicate with extraterrestrial people. He said, I made a decision. I was going to commit suicide. He said, I went into a spare bedroom, opened up a drawer, pulled out a pistol, put it up to the roof of my mouth. He said, I had my finger on the trigger to end the misery I was in. He said, why and how, I don't know, but I fell on the bed prone. He said, I didn't even know how to pray, and I don't even know if there is a God. I spit at you, I mocked at you, I made fun of you. He said, somehow, some way, would you touch my wretched life, or I'm going to kill myself? He said, guys, I can't explain this to you. The sun didn't dance in the sky. The sea didn't part. I heard no voices. There were no visions. But all of a sudden, he said, a peace took over my entire body. He said, for the first time in my life, he said, I was a miserable SOB until I took Jesus Christ into my life. Do not let your possessions possess you. And he walked out of the room. Well, we became friends. Very, very nice man. He shared with me one time before a ball game. We're sitting in the dressing room. He said, Coach, how do you suppose we lose our values? He said, well, I didn't have any values. He said, I was always told, you do this, you'll be a millionaire. Do this, you'll be famous. You'll have all the girlfriends. And he said, what causes that? And I said, Pete, the biggest explanation I can give you what causes it. The first Webster Dictionary printed was in 1806. In that dictionary, under the word success, it described it as fortunate, happy, kind, and prosperous. Now that rolled off my tongue pretty easy. Fortunate, happy, kind, and prosperous. That's what was in the dictionary. Now, whatever year that was, and it's the same now in 2021, if you pick up the dictionary and look under success, it'll describe success as attainment of wealth, fame, rank, and power. We've lost our moral compass, and that's why we're having all the problems we're having.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. I think, moral compass is, we still have. So, what are the lessons? What are the lessons that you got from your mom? I mean, I know I got goosebumps from the story, but you're a Hall of Fame coach and speaker and mentor. How do you go on the lessons your mom taught you in terms of all done without her mouth, her actions, taking the money back, 40 cents to the Red Owl, 25 cents to the Big New Eight, never, ever talking about the man that left her, never smoked, never drank, never dated anybody, never complained, never felt sorry for herself. An older woman that had to become a domestic and to go ahead and babysit for 50 cents an hour and live on a monthly check of $42.50. So maybe she won't ever be on the cover of Sports Illustrated or any famous magazine or newspaper, but boy, she's in God's Hall of Fame, her actions. So I learned from her. Any goodness I have in me, I have to credit it to two people, two of my mentors, my mother and John Wood. So, I mean, this stuff is all of incredible importance to me. Where do you think your mom got her character? I mean, she was an incredibly strong girl. Farm girl from North Dakota. Yeah. She grew up in 1935 when I was born, She was 40-some years old. I had two older sisters that were 12 and 11 years old when I was born. So just her, I guess her farm background and being from North Dakota, the ethics she learned. Yeah. I always believed that character is your most valuable asset and that it needs to be protected and cherished and never abandoned because I don't think you can get it back. Well, just what you said. The old poem, The Man in the Mirror. When you get what you want and struggle for self, and the world thinks you're king for a day, just go to the mirror, look at yourself, and see what that person has to say. It isn't your mother, father, sweetheart, or boss who's judgment upon you must pass. The person who counts most in your life is the one staring back at the glass. Oh yeah, you may get pats on the back in your past, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you cheated the man in the glass. And we all obviously, I went to Calcutta to meet Mother Teresa. After there a couple days, I said to a couple of people with me, this woman's either crazy or she's a saint. Well, before I left Calcutta, I found out she was a saint. Yeah. Why did you go? Heard so much about her, and I've traveled in 90 countries. Always had urge to learn. As a young kid, we didn't have a car. We didn't go any place. We had no vacations. Stuck in a one-room apartment, go sitting on the fire escape at night. I used to travel. I used to dream sitting there about traveling, and North Dakota's as flat as the top desktop, and I used to dream about what I like to climb mountains. As a result, that came to fruition. I climbed the Matterhorn. So the French call it idée fixée. Whatever you fix in your mind will happen if you work on it, not wishing it. Everybody wishes they were a better person. Everybody wishes they were well. Everybody wishes they were more down. Wishing is a bunch of baloney. You've got to will it. And you don't have to sell your soul to do it.
Hey, Coach. Hey, Rob, I got a question I want to ask Coach. Hey, Coach, so obviously I know a lot about you, and, you inspire the heck out of me. I'm a passionate guy, and you're 10 times as passionate as I am. But so, as a little kid for me, I was small, and I was insecure, and what gave me confidence was basketball and baseball. And I know that you were kind of insecure when you were young, but your whole life it seems like you've been so passionate and fought for other people. And I'm just curious to wonder, when you kind of found your confidence in who you were, was it easier to fight for yourself or fight for others?
Excellent question. I don't believe anybody's ever asked that to me. Let me tell you how it happened. I came home from my bowl of soup. Didn't have money, hot lunch program or anything, and run back to school quickly. There was a welfare worker, and my mother was sitting in a chair, and I could tell as I was eating this soup, this woman was intimidating her, saying, Ward County Welfare gives you $42.50 a month, and can't he work? She pointed to me like a little dog, and she said, go get your purse, she said, what are you doing with this $42? My mother's almost crying, and I remember she was going through my mother's purse and meeting her, and I remember sitting there thinking to myself, never again will I ever see anybody intimidated or see an injustice that I won't stand up. And eating that soup, I remember the anger I had. Shortly after that, months after that, I never owned a basketball, didn't have the money to get it. I'd take mittens and put tape on and form and shoot the hot water pipes out the hallway of this apartment house. Now you guys are probably too young to know what linoleum is, but there was linoleum in the hall. I came home one day after school, my mother was all upset. She said, Dale, the landlady came down here and she said, that brat of yours, he's out in the hall, he's scuffing up the linoleum. And if he keeps on doing that, you're going to get kicked out of this apartment and you're going to have to move. And my mother was just very nervous and she said, Dale, she said, what will we do? I took off down the hall, 4 security blind. I remember knocking on her door. She opened up her little peephole and I said, you leave my mother alone. You understand that? Don't you ever treat her like that. Then I went down the hall, the entire length of the hall, scuffing the linoleum with my heels as much as I could to defy what she was doing to my mother. So I think when I saw injustice, it was 10 years of age when I really saw it. The welfare worker and the landlady. And by the way, the landlady and her husband became very good friends of mine after that. They'd take me riding, they'd take me down to the train depot to watch a Great Northern Railroad come in, which was a big deal in a little town in Minot, North Dakota. They treated me with dignity. So,
Wow.
I think that's where that's got to be where I got it.
Well, it's definitely
It's just something inside of me. If I see an injustice, my dear friend Harry Edwards said silence. He's one of the great civil rights icons still living. He said silence is evil's greatest ally. Yeah. Yeah, if you say nothing, you're complicit. That's right.
Well, I love that, Coach, because that's, I see it all the time over here, and where I came from is that a lot of people can't speak for themselves, and they just take the abuse, and very few people really, stand up for them. So that's why I think interviewing you and some others the message is just so strong, and I just hope that people can hear it and get inspired to do the same thing, because, man, as you can see now, this world is jacked up, and people need support, and people fighting for them.
That's correct.
Thanks for that story. That's powerful.
I was depicted in your film, and it's powerful. It's a powerful image and a powerful story, and it's about respect and it's about empathy. Well, we're thick-headed, I guess, and our situation presently in our country, we've allowed this because we send people to Washington, D.C. and don't demand anything. And when you take on an establishment, years ago, I saw what the NCA, what they created, what they did. I spoke out against them heavily, and very few people did because they were intimidated by the NCA. The NCA, to me, those letters NCA, does not stand for National Collegiate Athletic Association. It stands for not caring about athletes. They have a market that they have. It's Frank DeFord, the old Sports Illustrated writer, said the largest legal cartel in the world is the NCAA. And so when I stood up to talk and call them what they actually were, etc., all of a sudden they decided they were going to have an investigation, which was totally counterfeit, totally wrong, and proven wrong, but went on. And so people, it takes energy to verbalize something, and you're going to be controversial if you do. So, but as my friend Harry Edwards said, silence is evil's greatest ally. Well, you certainly withstood. I think that was a real injustice to you, and we see it a lot. One of my greatest sort of negative beliefs is that misery loves company. Boy, that's true. And I think it's killing us, because there are a lot of people who prey on the miserable, and the only thing that they to make them feel better is to see other people miserable. Boy, that's valid. And life. And incidentally, there are a couple of specific questions I had that just interested me. One is your involvement with Native Americans. How did that come about?
Grew up in Indian country, North Dakota, the Lakotas. I saw the injustices they were given. I'm glad you brought that up. We have had, just an example, the mistreated, the most neglected, the most overlooked group of all is Native American. We took their land from them. We passed bills. We did everything to destroy them. We killed their leaders. We've had 370 treaties, the federal government of this country, with the Native Americans. And they have a perfect record of breaking those treaties that were made in some form. And yet we don't talk about it. So when you see, go back to Native America, go back to where Billy Mills was growing up in Pine Ridge, go back to North Dakota where I grew up and see how they live and what we've done to them. It's just tragic. You can't. And what happens is we remain silent about it. We don't complain enough about it. And as a result, it goes on and on and on and on. And it just makes me sick, the Native Americans, over the struggles they've gone through and what we've done to them. But when you think 370 treaties, we broke every one of them.
Yeah, pretty despicable.
I think also, maybe before we all should die, when Coach Wooden told me about Edgar Guest, I became really, I love to read. And Edgar Guest wrote a piece that really and truly, I think all of us, before we leave this earth, should probably have up on the mirror all the time. He said, quote, I have to live with myself, and I want to be fit for myself to know. I want to be able to, as the days go by, always to look myself straight in the eye. I don't want to stand with the setting sun and hate myself for the things I've done. I want to be able to go out with my head erect. I want to be able to deserve all people's respect. For here in the struggle for fame and self, I want to be able to like myself. I don't want to look at myself and know that I'm a cluster and an empty show. I know what others may never know. I see what others may never see. So I want to be self-respecting and conscience-free. How many of us can do that? How many people? See, everybody can complain, but who's going to do something about it? The present situation in Washington, D.C., I went back twice, seriously debating running for Senate. I thought there's no possible way I'm going to run for Senate. The situation we have going back there. So, again, just being silent to things. We go back to Auschwitz. My wife and I visited Auschwitz one summer, and as we were going through the museum, I couldn't take it anymore. I'll meet you outside. Dale, you're so impatient. I'll meet you outside. Anger. I was crying. I had frustration. I went out and I walked down this little gravel road, leaning up, nice summer day, leaning my head up against a pole, which later on I found was a railroad tie that they brought the people in the boxcars in. And I felt something on there. I was saying to myself, how could this happen? And on that little plaque, it said, the road to Auschwitz was built by hatred, but it was paved with indifference and apathy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens. We just don't speak up. There's a lot of good people in the world, but they remain silent. Albert Einstein, considered by many people maybe the most intellectual man that ever lived, said it isn't the evil people that I worry about. It's all the good people that do nothing about the evil people.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know how you address it. It's hard to, it seems like the evil is getting stronger and the good doing is getting less respect and less regard in the public domain. So that's why I think it's so important to
using what we made this country great and not complaining enough, not demanding enough.
How do you think we change it?
I think just by what I said, verbalizing it, contacting people. The easiest way out, what can little old me do? I'll tell you what little old you can do. Whoever's listening to this program. Years ago, this century, there's a little monk in a cloistered monastery outside the city of Rome. His name was Telemachus. Telemachus. He was out walking this one spring or summer day, and he saw a bunch of people heading down the road, crowded. What's this? So he followed them, and he'd never been into Rome. He lived on the outskirts, but he was in this cloistered monastery. Well, they took him, he followed him to the Roman Colosseum. He didn't even have any idea it was there. Way up on top. He thought it was a sporting event or something. He saw these two gladiators come out and battle each other, and one killed the other guy, and they praise him, and he stands up. And please, in the name of God, stop this. Sit down, you idiot. Ran down to the restraining order. Stood up on that. Two more gladiators come out. He pleaded for him again. Please, in the name of God. Now the crowd, get that idiot out. He runs out and kneels down between the two in the middle of the stadium. They're ready now to go on their battle. He says, please, on his knees, please, in the name of God, stop this. The gladiator looked up, and of course, Caesar gives the thumbs down, get rid of the guy. They slash his stomach open. He falls on that ground, bleeds to death in the middle of that Colosseum. Now, if the story ended there, you could say, yeah, that's what happens. Open your mouth, you get knocked down. All of a sudden, a silence took over in that stadium. Became eerie. People started to leave the stadium. 15 days later, Caesar signed a decree. There would be no more gladiator fights in the stadium in Rome. One guy, Telemachus. So I don't want to hear that. What can little old me do? What little old you can do? Whatever you want to do. Be encouraged.
Yeah. If I might, I want to send you a little piece of video I did with a Lakota medicine man some years back. Okay.
Where did you do it? Whereabouts?
Well, I actually met him in Russia when I was there in 1990 for Marisa Gorbachev-sponsored project called the Seventh Generation Soviet American Conference on Peace, Children, and the Environment. And a bunch of us went from Philadelphia. There were teachers and artists and healers. I was the video guy, so I got to record everything. And Pete Catches, his name was Pete Catches, Walks with Fire, and he lived on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And when we got back to the States, I interviewed him about his goal, which was to create a treatment center. Ochedi Wakan was it was returning to traditional ways of healing his people from alcoholism and everything. But I think you'll just find it, I'm sure you'll find it interesting.
Great, I'd like to get it. You know, as we're talking about this, Charles Krauthammer is now passed away, one of the famous journalists I thought of all time. You ask, what can we do? He said, quote, you're betraying your whole life if you don't say what you think. And boy, is that the truth. And Martin Luther King said something similar. You're not only responsible for what you say, but for what you do not say. So it takes effort, there's no question about it, to speak well, what can I do? Or what can I do? Think of Telemachus. Think of what Charles Krauthammer said. Think of what Martin Luther King said.
Those are people of character.
Winston Churchill, what he really liked, he said, courage is the first of human qualities, because it's the quality that guarantees all the others. So if you don't have courage to speak up, then things are going to get worse and worse and worse.
You know, I had another question. This is something I'm dealing with, and Greg knows about it. And I read your thing about not complaining, and I just need some advice because we're trying to help some people. My brother's wife had early onset Alzheimer's, so he's been caring for her for about 15 years, and she was a powerful, busy attorney, and now really can't put two sentences together. And there are 15 million family member caregivers in the country caring for somebody they love who has dementia.
15 million?
Yes, in this country.
Wow.
50 million around the world. So
Wow.
you're trying to create a platform to help them. My brother's an unusual guy, and I think he deals with things better than most. But one of the things, the most important thing we're trying to help people with is their mindset. So one day you got everything going for you, and you have a job and a family and all of that,
Yep.
and then you get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, or your wife does, or whoever, and you know it's ultimately a death sentence, and it's going to get worse, and it's never going to get better, but you have a job to do. And so we want to try to encourage people to do the job the best they possibly can, and at the same time take care of themselves, because caregivers suffer mightily. So how do you instill resilience?
I just, a couple years ago, I did a speech in New Orleans for a national convention on caretakers. And caretakers have to be very conscious of them not being destroyed for the people they're taking care of. And oftentimes that can happen. They can be with all the pressures and all the sadness and all the effort they have to put into it. So caretakers have to be very careful of themselves, or they can become a victim.
Very true. So how do you get somebody to kind of accept the challenge, take a stoic approach, and decide rather than saying, why me, and give up, and, how do you get somebody to be positive, be strong, it comes back to success. The success, in that case, you're not going to cure the person, but success is doing the best job you can. How do you instill people to stand up in the face of adversity?
Well, there's no pill, prayer, or prescription. And I think what you have to understand, adversity is only going to visit the strong, but it stays forever with the weak. And the only thing more powerful than fear is the boldness of faith. So if you haven't got faith, then all of a sudden we're taking God out of the school. We can't have the Ten Commandments, so we can't do this. We're becoming a godless country. Even the oath of office and everything, we're eliminating that. So I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about spirituality.
Yeah.
So 2 and 2 is 4. It'll never be 3. It can't be 5. It sure as hell ain't going to be 6. It's 4. That ain't the way it's worked now. Everybody's trying to make 2 and 2 something else. So when you take God out of the equation, the problems are fairly simple. And I'm not, I don't think I'm religious. I hope I'm spiritual. And without that, I mean, you can't live a proper life without faith.
Yeah. So do you believe, Coach, that everything happens for a reason?
Well, sometimes you wonder. I think that it's Thomas Aquinas said, to one without faith, no explanation is possible. So if you don't have faith, as bad as things may be, yeah, and I've seen some people, I tell you, I've helped people that were crippled, were born with deficiencies, couldn't walk, and they had more strength. I'll give you an example. There was a young boy that was blind, and he got around with a cane. He was so positive. Alan Levine was his name. He's now passed. And he'd come to practice and everything, and I'd take him with me. I went to give a speech about 30 minutes from Baton Rouge. And we're driving back to Baton Rouge, which is less than a half an hour. And I said, Alan, you ever driven a car? No, I haven't driven a car. And I said, would you like to drive a car? Yeah. I pulled over. Before I pulled over, I let him hear the taps in the middle of the road if you're getting too far out. You hear click, 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 click. You can hear the gravel on the side. So I said, okay, you're going to drive. He drove 10 miles. And with just the little information I gave, well, that led into something even more. I got a call, and he wanted to know what I was going to do this weekend. And I said, why you ask that? He said, well, I'd like you to meet me in this little town. He said, at the gas station. I got a surprise for you. I said, okay. So I drove out to this gas station. Here he was sitting in a pickup with a guy. And he said, follow us, coach. So we drove out in the middle of a sugarcane field, and here's a little airplane, little prop airplane, sitting out in that field. And he got out of the car and he says, coach, he said, I'm doing this, he said, in honor of you. He said, I'm going to become the youngest blind skydiver of all time. And I'd like you to go up in the plane with me. And I said, what? So we go up in this airplane, rickety old airplane, and he's standing on this little tiny step, and all they had on the ground was a big old circle with an X in the middle of it. And he had headset on. He stands out, goodbye, coach, and he jumped off, and I thought, wow. He landed exactly where he's supposed to land, and he can't see at all. So now, he did something even greater than that. He told me, he said, you know, I remember your speech, or you talking about eat it, fix it, whatever you think in your mind. And he said, I learned something. I learned about the bats. He said they can send out ultrasound. So he said, what I started doing, he'd do this with it. He said, well, I found out I had my mother hold up glass, cardboard, paper, cloth, and I could tell, like a bat can send out ultrasound. He said, I could tell what it was. And so now he came down the hall the first time he came to the office. And the reason he did it, the woman told him, it's a fifth door on the left and it's a wood door. Now, if the door had been open, he probably would have gone by it, but it wasn't open. So people can do unbelievable things, but you can't do it without faith.
And believe, yeah, believe. And, you know, I mean, you probably can't do it without someone to give you a leg up, as you did for him.
Yeah, we all need a mentor sometimes. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I think that's important. Greg talks a lot about ripples. That your actions send out ripples that have, you know, effect. And I think you're living proof of that. And I think we all want to be living proof of that.
Well, last year, to show you the despair in the world, last year, 1 million people in the world committed suicide. 1 million. Which is despair at its greatest.
Yeah.
And when you do talk positive, you do have optimism. They either call you Pollyanna, or what are you, man? Are you nuts? It's almost like to be negative has been. To be negative and talk and complain instead of doing anything about it or being positive is no longer fashionable.
Yeah, it's viewed as weakness. If you care, it's viewed as weakness.
Yeah.
But it's really just the opposite.
I mean, it's easy to, it's very easy to be a follower. And, with all this social media and media attention, people just want attention. So it's easier to get it through negative stuff than positive stuff. And it takes strength to stand up for it. And basically, people just don't have it. And it's not being passed along by, teachers and these politicians, but they're seeing it all day long and taking the intellectual knowledge in their brain and screwing them up. But it's too easy to just be negative. And it's impacting a lot of people in the wrong way.
Well, we're all going to face adversity, and if we can learn, really and truly, adversity only misses the strong, but stays forever with the weak. So it's our decision. When we have adversity, are we going to be strong or are we going to be weak? If we're weak, it'll be with us forever. Everybody's going to have adversity, heartache, divorce, alcoholism, drug addiction, whatever, losing your job, being sick, losing a loved one.
Yeah. My son's a college baseball player, and a lesson that, and I've certainly coached him and a lot of kids in high school baseball, and one of the lessons that I wanted him to believe in, number one is everything is a choice.
Yeah, that's true. The choice we make makes us.
That's correct. And the one thing you can control is your attitude. And all these things sound cliche, but they're all real. And, it's kind of a nature-nurture thing again. I think you're a combination of nature and nurture. Your mom certainly had the strength of character to provide an example that you've lived through that impacted your whole life. But you're a grown man now, and you've made decisions your whole life. So
just what Coach Wooden said, Greg and Ron, I feel the same. I'm 85 years old. I'm still a work in progress. But the one thing I know, I will never give up trying to be better. And John Wooden told me an interesting story when he's getting ready to go to Purdue. His daddy walked him out to the bus and gave him a hug and told him, Johnny, he said, now you're going up there with all them big boys playing ball and all that. He said, don't try to be better than anyone else. That'll drive you nuts. But son, never cease to be the best you can be, and you'll find peace. Pretty good knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I've got to run to a meeting.
Coach, I can't thank you enough for your time. And
Greg and Rob, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Coach.
And I hope somebody got something out of it. He had some good questions, good probing questions.
Thank you. We got a lot out of it.
And maybe we can chat with you again so we figure out how to bring the message to more people than just Greg and me. I hope we'll be able to do that with you.
Well, I do too, guys. Thanks a lot for including me.
Thanks, Coach.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Here they are, ladies and gentlemen. Give a standing ovation as they leave the room.
Thanks, Coach.
Okay, guys. Bye.
Thank you.